Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kylie. Hi, everyone, again. It's the highlight of my week being with you guys on a Wednesday. And thank you again to the Better Health Generation for this, what will be an amazing, insightful webinar, I'm sure. This is the 7th and penultimate webinar in our series of 8 in partnership with the Better Health Generation. Thanks again to Kylie and the team for putting these together. I personally have found them and professionally found them very insightful throughout the last few weeks. As you well know, this week's webinar is Increasing Employability for Job Seekers with Mental Health Conditions. I'm sure that's going to be of real use to us all. Just a little bit of a plug at the bottom there. Make sure that you sign up for the rest of the series when the links are published through the IEP Learning Network e-bulletin. Please stay safe, stay well, and get chatting on the link. I've been saying hello to a few of you. And please remember that the webinars are recorded and are available on the IEP YouTube channel. So thank you very much again, and over to you, Kylie.
Thank you very much. So many of you may have joined my webinars previously, but I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Dr. Kylie Henderson. I am a clinical psychologist. I have my 20-year certificate, which is quite scary. But my first position as a psychologist was in drug and alcohol rehab. So it's probably no surprise to you all that I have a keen interest in mental health and work. My PhD was in mental health and work, and I'm particularly focused on making sure that people with a mental health condition are given the same opportunities as everybody else to find work. Secondly, I'm sure it's no surprise to you all that my PhD identified that you don't need to solve mental health issues to help somebody to find work, because work is in fact a saviour and a therapy for many who have a mental health condition. So if we can help people with mental health conditions to find the right job in the current labour market, their mental health will improve subsequent to that. So that's what I'm focused on giving you this lunch and learn session about today, is how do we help people with mental health conditions to find work in the current labour market. I'm particularly focused on the labour market post-COVID-19. So thank you to the IEP again. Two key goals the IEP has. Firstly, it's about networking, and I'm really excited to see everybody chatting. Please do keep chatting. And the second goal is to help each and every one of us in the employability sector to improve the skills that we have, to make sure that we're up to date with all the evidence, and to ensure that if we're doing that, we will be helping more people to return to work. So I'm a big advocate of the IEP, and I thank everybody for coming tonight. If you don't know much about the Better Health Generation, please join our LinkedIn page. But the Better Health Generation UK is made up of a number of companies. I won't go into each of those tonight, but needless to say, we employ about 350 staff across the world, psychologists, occupational therapists, physios, nurses, exercise physiologists, all of those people in the health sector that help to improve people to achieve their full potential. So that might be job seekers or staff. But let's get into it. I'm going to conceptualise tonight's discussion around this job seeker continuum. So I'll get you to just think a little bit higher level for this first section. When we first start with a job seeker, we go through what I call stage 1, which is the engagement process. Many of our job seekers are volunteering to come to our services, so we do need to focus our attention on how we engage a job seeker, how we invite them into our offices, or how we start those conversations with them. The second stage of the job seeker continuum is the assessment. It's really not a discrete stage assessment. It's something that continues on throughout the continuum with a job seeker. But in this model, I've started it as a discrete. This is our first assessment of how we're going to help a job seeker. In stage 3, we start talking about how we might motivate the job seeker to address barriers to employment. But we might also start in stage 3 to talk to the job seeker about considering occupations that they can do now, rather than waiting, as I said earlier, for their mental health condition to be solved. It may be that we could help start the process by looking at available jobs now in the market that the job seeker could do. Stage 4 is then potentially linking the job seeker to interventions. If there is a gap between what the job seeker can do now and what is available in the current labour market, we need to look at what interventions are available to support that job seeker to move forward. We might include vocational interventions or non-vocational interventions, and the differentiator there is obviously the vocational is looking at all of the aspects of the return to work process, including interview skills, selection criteria, and the like. And the non-vocational, we term, I think it's a worldwide term, of all the health and psychosocial factors that might be impacting on somebody gaining work. So they could be things like caring responsibilities, they could be drug and alcohol, there may be other mental health conditions as well. I guess in stage 5, we then start to set the goals. We know and understand how to link the interventions to the barriers that the job seeker is facing, and we start to set some goals with the job seeker working collaboratively. What's really important, I guess, around that time is also helping the job seeker to maintain motivation, particularly towards job search. In stage 6, we then place the job seeker into work and obviously start the maintaining them in work or potentially progressing them. So there's probably a stage 7 there, which is career progression. Along this whole journey and the whole continuum, there's a skill that we need, which is called working with resistance, and how we might help to facilitate the job seeker through these stages of the continuum. So I've identified the stages as being quite discrete stages, but as we know through our work that job seekers can kind of go up and down these stages at various intervals. But it's particularly important for you to be aware of these stages because you need a set of expertise within and skills within each of these stages. You need to be skilled at engaging. You need to be skilled at assessing a job seeker. You need to be skilled at motivating the job seeker to assess barriers, and so on and so on. So if we had to slice up your expertise as an employment provider, you would need to have many of these skills that are in the continuum. My focus tonight, however, is going to be more on the motivating, stage 3, motivating the job seeker to consider other occupations and motivating the job seeker to address barriers to employment. So I'll just focus on that stage. Some of these earlier stages, the engaging the job seeker and assessing the job seeker, will be in some of our future webinars. I think as we're working with resistance, which is a really important skill to have. So let's talk about job person fit. It's a universal term that we use quite a lot. But what it really means is if we are to find the ideal job for a person with a mental health condition, we need to find a connection between IQ, skills and capacity. I'll just try and annotate here, this one here. And then the job seeker's interests, whether that be their personal or work interests, and then a match between their personality. I thought this little comic was quite good. You know, you must fit this job and walk in this circle. But essentially what we're trying to do in our roles, if we break it down, is to find a middle ground here. How do we find a job for a job seeker with a mental health condition that matches their current intellectual capacity or their current cognitive capacity, the current skills they have, the current physical capacity that they have, their overall interests, and their personality. So let's talk about each of these factors within the job person fit model to make sure that we all understand them. So if we take a job seeker with depression, and you've seen me use this slide before, the symptoms of depression here, the case example I want to run through tonight's presentation is a job seeker with depression. So a job seeker who has depressed mood most of the day that doesn't go away, a job seeker who has sleeping difficulties, sleeping way too much in this example, they have impaired concentration, they also have changes in their weight. With all of our questioning techniques in this stage, we need to consider what the frequency of that symptom is, what the severity of that symptom is, and what the duration of that symptom is. What we're really trying to assess here is how impacted is the job seeker based on their medical condition. So you can see here, symptom 1, the depressed mood most of the day. The kinds of questions that will start to elicit the frequency is, how often are you feeling that way? And you'll get the answer from the job seeker all day. How serious is it for you though? Well, I can still do my cleaning and my washing, but I just have this, black cloud over me, I feel most of the day. And how long have you been feeling like that? I guess the next question for some of us inquiring types might be, well, what makes it better and what makes it good? Is there anything that makes it better and anything that makes that good for you? But essentially what I'm trying to do is to discover what the impact of the mental health condition is on the person and their activities of daily living. I'm trying to find a hole here, or a little nugget of gold, I guess, in what somebody might be able to do, rather than just focusing in on the things that they can't do because of their mental health condition. So by understanding the frequency, severity, and duration of each of the symptoms that a job seeker presents with, we can help to find that little gap, that little strength that we're really vying for to help build a work capacity for them. The next symptom is a really great example of that. So I sleep too much. I sleep most days and I can't get to sleep until 2 a.m., which then causes me to not wake up until 10. And I've been sleeping in this pattern for the last 3 years. Well, really quickly, my brain goes to, right, okay, a night shift. Would a night shift role work for this person? What are the opportunities that we could find for this person? The third symptom is impaired concentration. I don't feel I can concentrate. It happens twice a day and it's mostly in the afternoons. So again, I start thinking about what are roles that might match that particular capacity. When I inquire a little bit more about the severity of that particular symptom, I find that, in fact, he can watch TV, he can still use sharp utensils, but he does feel that he misses parts of the story and kind of drifts off into another world. I guess the next part about that is me asking, well, is there any times that it's better and any times that it's worse? Do you really like crime shows? What shows keep your interest? How many minutes can you hold your interest? Most of us can only hold it for 20 minutes. So if a job seeker said to me that they can watch and listen to the news for 20 minutes, I'd be pretty happy with that. The next thing is changes in appetite, which is another symptom that this job seeker was presenting with. And again, you can see how I've used the frequency, severity, and duration symptoms questions there to find out what's going on. I guess this brings me to the first circle in the job person fit, is what is my capacity, IQ, and skills that I have now? So again, what transferable skills am I using during the day to demonstrate that I do have some capacity to work? And again, this is about questioning the routine. Tell me a little bit about how you spend your day. What are the things that you do? I know you get up at 10 a.m. and I know you go to bed at 2, but are there certain things that you do? It's really interesting when we hear job seekers say, I'm illiterate, I can't read. And then I inquire a little bit more about how they spend their days, and they're quite good on their phones and they're reading messages and getting the notifications and news. So they can do some reading. There is some capacity that we're looking for to find that nugget of gold that we can help that person to flourish in work. And again, how do you spend your days? If we're talking about capacity, how many steps do you think you take? Do you climb stairs? Do you cook? Do you phone people? Do you read? Do you do laundry, housework, driving, managing finances? A good example here is a job seeker who has a back injury, and I ask them about cleaning. I say, you know, do you vacuum your own floors? Yes, I do vacuum my own floors. How many minutes do you generally vacuum your own floors for? 15 minutes. Okay. I think I now know that if I can find you a job that matches your interests and matches this capacity. You've got a capacity to do something for 15 minutes and then you've got to sit down. So I need a job where you can stand and sit and you can rotate your position. So these kind of questions help me to determine capacity. When we start talking about interests, we can't forget that people have certain personal interests, such as, you know, loving soccer or loving bike riding or any of those types of things, that we'd love to be able to link their personal love for into work. You know, the soccer loving dad that then gets the job at the retail soccer store or gets the job at the stadium. You know, we'd love to be able to, in an ideal world, connect people's personal interests to work, because when their interests are met, we find that they begin to thrive the most. Again, the questions we might be asking and inquiring here is, if we can't find any personal interests, I then start asking the job seeker to look at job vacancies and try not to think about the things that they can't do and things that won't be enough money or earning or all of those types of stopping factors, and look at the job ads and tell me which one you'd really love to do. It's hard sometimes for job seekers because they become quite stuck in the things they can't do. So I often give them some time to go away and think about that and come back to me. And what you find is that people do bring jobs back that they love. So there is something and a desire and an interest that people will still have despite having a mental health condition. Personality, there are a multitude of psychological personality tests. I think one of the most famous ones is the MMPI, which is nearly 380 questions. So we could go and drill down to that level of detail, but I think just understanding if the job seeker knows what 10 words describe them, if there's different preferences that they have, how their boss might describe them. Do they like indoor, outdoor? Do they like working in teams? Do they like working individually? And what about routine and flexibility? Do they like that? Some of these, and what are their values? Some of these questions are far more effective than a 380 item MMPI or personality assessment inventory. It's really just asking some really practical questions to find out how self-aware, I guess, the job seeker is. If we put this into practice and we try and match the IQ, capacity, skills, interest and personality, and we find the job that matches all three of these, we then need to make sure it's available in the local labour market. What we don't want to do is to set somebody up to fail and suggest a job that's not really ever going to be available. In Australia, one of the most common jobs that people would really love to do is developing games in technology. They'd love to be able to be one of those gaming designers. Now, such a tricky industry to get into, but we see young people all the time with mental health conditions loving the opportunity to go into that industry, and it is a long journey for somebody in that space. So sometimes we don't want to squash those goals, but we want to talk to our job seekers about stepping stone opportunities. So what are the opportunities to step into that role? let's do some industry research and talk to some people in that industry and see if we can find out what their pathway of getting into that job was. But at the same time, let's start thinking about opening up the opportunities there a little more. So current labour market opportunities, as we know them post-COVID-19, will certainly be in construction, distribution or warehousing, and gardening. Now, I've found these tasks for each of these roles in the National Careers Service website. These are the kinds of things that you would need to do and the capacity that you would need to have to perform in these particular roles. I guess it's another process of inquiry when we're trying to match the job person fit, is to talk to the job seeker about whether or not they think they could currently do any of these skills or demonstrate any of these skills, to find out where they're at now and where they need to be in that occupation. Now, obviously, the National Careers Service only shows us the general skills that you would need for that particular occupation. And as we know, different employers have different specs for their particular jobs. So whilst we may find that a job seeker comes back and says, actually, I don't think I'm that flexible and open to change in relation to the distribution job, but I do think I could do all those other things, then it's our role, I guess, to negotiate with that employer and discuss what the opportunities might be specifically, and to assess whether or not you do actually need to be flexible and open to change in that particular work site, because each work site will be slightly different. Many of you on the line will have also heard about the term job carving, and this may also be the opportunity that we start thinking about job carving. If there is a particular subset of skills that are that the job seeker with a mental health condition is finding difficult to perform, maybe there's an opportunity to look at job carving and carving out a section of that job that might match that particular person. So again, I find in helping someone with a mental health condition to return to work, resources like the National Career website a really great conversation starter with job seekers, and I print it out and we talk about it together, and we go through and have a look at each of these skills that you might need to demonstrate. I'm sure it's no surprise to you that then leads us to conversations about, how I might demonstrate these skills on my resume, and what I might also do on my CV, or how I might demonstrate these skills in an interview, and so on. So it's a really great resource. So if we put this model into practice and we look back at those 3 elements of the job person fit, if we've got a job seeker suffering with depression, as I detailed before, with those symptoms, and they're interested in the 3 different types of occupations, they're interested in the warehousing, the construction, and the gardening, which one, should we kind of be steering them towards right now based on their current symptoms? If we go back and have a look at the skills here required, I guess you could say that there were some concentration difficulties that the job seeker was talking about earlier. So given that distribution, we need to have really good attention to detail, there may be some issues in that occupation. However, the job seeker was telling me that only happens twice and it's in the afternoon. So we'd have to consider that. When we looked down at construction and gardening, things that were going on in my mind is whether or not they might be at heights, and could concentration be a problem there, or does that match their capacity? With gardening, will they be accessing tools and power tools, and do I need to consider that as well? The other obvious part about the capacity of this job seeker is we're really aiming for a night shift type of role that matches the current sleeping patterns that have been in place for the last 3 years. So is Is there an opportunity for night shift in construction? Maybe not in gardening either. So we may be kind of more steering down this distribution path. But you can see how, I guess, by asking the right questions up front in relation to the capacity, both cognitive and physical skills, interest and personality, all lead you to having these really rich conversations with a person with a mental health condition about what they can absolutely do now. You can see here, I don't think I know the exact answer to my question, which is which one should we be steering the job seeker towards? But I think that's a really rich conversation to have with somebody, and to find out what they think they could do in those particular roles. Now we're almost running out of time. I have done a lot of talking tonight. Sorry, I have to speed up. The other factor, I guess, that's really important here is motivating the job seeker. I might go into this in a bit more detail in next week's webinar if we run out of time tonight. But we've put together the solved model. It's a really specific way of you engaging with a job seeker if there is a discrepancy between the job requirements that they want to do, that gardening job, and their current capacity. If there's a discrepancy, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to help that job seeker to address those barriers to gaining that particular position? The S in the solve model is helping the job seeker to specify what the problem is. If we use the warehousing job as an example, the first problem that we have for that particular position is the concentration difficulties. We need someone in warehousing to pay attention to detail. So my questioning to the job seeker at that point might be, you know, we understand that we need to build our capacity to concentrate. That's the problem, that's the S. What are our options for solving it? And I pose that question directly to the job seeker because the most powerful solutions come from the job seeker, not from me. It's a bit like me telling my daughter to wear the red dress because she looks really great in it. She'll go into her bedroom and choose the green one. But what she will do if I put the red and the green one out on her bed before she starts getting ready, she'll choose one of the ones that I actually like. So you can see how leaving ideas and getting ideas from somebody is more powerful and motivating, and giving them options and getting them to choose how they want to address those barriers is the much more powerful approach. I guess once the options are on the table, it's then about listing the pros and cons and what is the likely positives out of trying this strategy and what are the likely negatives out of this strategy. And then I guess together we come to a solution and we verify what we're going to try. Not all solutions to addressing barriers are going to work. So we give it a chance and the job seeker might say, look, I think what I should do is try and time how long I can concentrate for, and let's see, or take a log of how many times I miss out on information in the afternoons and see if I can do that. Or it might be that I'm just a bit bored in the afternoons and I might try and go outside and do a bit of sorting out in the garage and see how I go with my concentration. So doing really practical things to help the job seeker to address the barrier that we need them to address. The E is evaluating and the D is documenting the plan. The D is really powerful. It's not just about the legislation and your employment services contract. It's about giving the job seekers something to take away, you know, 2 or 3 things that they can start working on after your meeting with them. So the solved model is really helpful, and you can see I've got some case examples in here. Some you mentioned that your depression's getting in the way of you finding work. Let's talk about some options for addressing this. What are the options here? What are the benefits to talking to your doctor? What are the negatives here? Which of the 2 options would you like to choose? And let's focus on those 2 options for the next 2 to 4 weeks and see where we get to. So the solved model is a great way of making sure we don't get distracted in our conversations. And it's also a great way of ensuring, you know, you don't have to have all the answers, and helping the job seeker to elicit some of those answers. Because let me tell you, if you have a mental health condition, you've probably thought about how you might be able to solve it. It's not the kind of issue that you just sit around home and ignore it. People know and have thought about ways to solve it. It's just about actualizing those strategies and making those strategies happen. Another example here. So I guess you can see here in summarizing, coming to our summary, not all barriers are barriers. If you've got a job seeker with a mental health condition, it's not a barrier unless the job that they're going for in the local labour market has a particular set of requirements that we need the job seeker to address. People with mental health conditions can work. Mental health is not a barrier to work. We simply need to find those strengths that the job seeker has and match those to the local labour market needs. Until we know what jobs are going to be in the local labour market post-COVID-19, we really don't know if it's a real barrier. We understand at the moment that economists are telling us that distribution, warehousing, retail, and if we look to the job ads at the moment, there are some retail industries and hospitality industries and gardening. All of those types of occupations are still going to be in existence post-COVID-19. So it's about us talking to our clients about what kind of stepping stone opportunities and what the benefits of a stepping stone job like that might be, even if their true job match might be in another certain area. So they're the 4 things I really wanted you to take away from today. If you ask the right questions, a barrier is not a barrier. Mental health shouldn't be a barrier if we find the right job. People will thrive more and their mental health will improve if they're in a good job that matches their strengths. That doesn't mean to say that when you're in a job and you've got a mental health condition that you don't need any more support. That's absolutely not true. We do need to provide continued support in that post-placement support phase. So again, it's about getting them over that hurdle in that continuum. As I said earlier, it's about these 6 stages. How do we get them closest to work as quickly as possible and help them when they're in work? So guys, the other point about this presentation is that I have missed out a couple of the stages. We've talked about these other 4 stages being very important. My colleague and our CEO, Natalie Keating, is on the line at the moment. In her 6 series, EC-based toolkit series, she will be going through each of the 4, 5, 6 and the working with resistance stages, as well as the assessment and engaging stage, because I've run out of a bit of time tonight. We did start these seminars yesterday, but you can still sign up and you will get a recording of yesterday's presentation. There's a lot more tools in these longer training sessions that Natalie's running. And Natalie, I'm not sure if you can come off mute, but have I missed anything about your training there?
No, not at all. So very much looking forward to delivering this 2nd session next Tuesday. And as you said, we will be linking in and delivering more of building really on what you've now commenced. And that will be part of next week's session.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So Helen, I might move to some questions. We've got a few, it looks like, in the Q&A set. In the Q&A box.
Yeah, if you want to start with those, you've got quite a few in there. There's 6. Some of them are linked though, some of them are comments, but we do have a few questions in there this week.
So Mark Story has mentioned that so many variables, context to each person with a very unique mental health condition and employment. Engagement is of paramount importance, and without it, no realistic foundation to build on. I absolutely agree, Mark, and hence engagement is right at the front end. In fact, what we know, if we don't engage accurately, that the level of truth in the information that comes out of a job seeker's mouth throughout the rest of the journey is diluted. So Mark, I totally agree with you. You've got to get the engagement piece right, and that means having really good rapport with your job seekers so that you can deal with high quality information that's in your conversations with job seekers. And I guess that's particularly hard over the phone as well. You know, you've got to use other skills when you're trying to build rapport over the phone. Next question. Getting a lot of feedback from coaches that they are speaking to participants who are sharing anxiety, nervousness about and lack of confidence about beginning to get back into wider world and moving from isolation towards a new norm with the lessening of restrictions. How can we support these job seekers? Excuse me, that's not COVID. Rihanna, I totally agree, but I think we're all feeling that way. I think hearing the anxiety, listening, empathizing, providing a really good active listening skills is important, and probably normalizing it, because if I'm feeling that way as a human, and you're feeling that way, I think it's okay to normalize it and say, hey, there's a lot of people feeling that way. What can we do, and what could you do at this moment to help you to move into the new norm? And again, it's coming back to that solve model. It's specifying what the problem is. You know, I'm hearing that you're feeling a sense of anxiety. Let's talk about some options. What could we do about it? And hi, Mark, again. It could almost be seen as a professional cliche today, but the securing of some congruent understanding for each person is getting harder with COVID. Just encourage one SU to get some exercise after question context to employment whilst in an asylum seeking situation. Incredibly difficult scenarios to contend with if struggling with a mental health condition without appropriate cognitive triggers, and then supporting information. Truly difficult place for most, I think, is the context there. Yeah, I can't agree more. I think there are people in the restrictions do reduce the opportunities for us to address barriers in many ways. All I can say to you, Mark, is I empathise with that. I think there are limits to what we can do at the moment, and it's about, again, trying to identify if there's anything that we could do, and not giving up, having the tenacity to not let somebody give up, and using your questioning techniques to help them to think about what the new normal might be, as Rihanna said. Many so sadly caught in what was. Thank you, Mark.
We've got a question there, Kylie, from Deb Chowney.
Deb, a great many job seekers say they have a mental health condition, but have never had a diagnosis, which leads to some. I think, Deb, that's a good question. So my feedback to that is you don't need to have a diagnosis to have a capacity to work, to have some strengths and weaknesses in that capacity building element. So if somebody doesn't like the diagnosis of a mental health condition, and there's many people that still unfortunately don't, I would still be using the same strategies around the job person fit, and looking at the strengths and weaknesses and looking at matching those to the local labour market, and still developing a plan with them. And with the solved model, we're only addressing the barriers in kind of 2 to 4 week increments. So once we've exhausted all of the options that the job seeker's putting forward, I guess you then start to get the opportunity to make some of your suggestions, and they're potentially more open to hear about those.
Excellent. And we've had some comments on the chat around people focusing on the control and the smaller things we can control at the moment being really effective. And I know we spoke about that in the first session, didn't we? Managing anxiety through the control of things that we can, rather than the external factors. I also had something come through on the chat earlier on during the presentation around how to approach, and they mentioned testing clients' IQ, but I think maybe EIQ might be one of the things that it can be tricky, or it may have lent towards. So are there any ways you would suggest doing that?
You mean addressing someone's cognitive capacity?
Yeah, I think so. It came, the comment came in around IQ, and I know we've spoken before about, you know, the average IQ being around 100, but actually we've been talking in this series a lot more about EI, emotional intelligence, and that quota instead. So how would we go about measuring that or assessing?
Yeah, so a psychologist is normally qualified to deliver what's called a Wechsler intelligence scale. In relation to IQ though, again, it does come back to what the cognitive capacity might be for that particular job that you're going for. So to answer your question, you can get a formal IQ assessment. What that would tend to lead to in our context of employability is that if the person has a significant impairment in their intellectual capacity, there might be some extra supports we can put in place, such as one-on-one mentoring in work, or supported employment opportunities that we could consider. So again, there are some thresholds in the lower end of IQ that might lead us to creating other opportunities for that person, rather than putting somebody with a lower IQ into a trolley collecting job when their greatest aspiration is to do graphic design. So again, it comes back to the supported employment opportunities and how we might be able to navigate and help someone and advocate for them to get on that pathway.
Excellent, thank you. And we've had another question come in through the Q&A, and it says, a question from another coach. I have inherited a couple of participants who are male, over 60, who admit they have mental health issues, but will not take up any offer of support, no matter how small, to begin with. I've tried offering online support, phone support, and befrienders, but none have been taken up. How do we reach out to someone who doesn't want the help we are offering when we know they are struggling? It's a great question.
It's an excellent question. I think, Rhianna, it's about identifying what the goals are that they have. Is their goal to get into work? If it is to get into work, it's identifying what the behaviours are within the mental health condition that is preventing that person from moving to work, and then creating some scaffolding and some steps. Again, what I find is if somebody doesn't want to go to counselling, I normally ask them, well, I've noticed that your mood is sometimes impairing the way that we chat and the way that we get along. What are some steps do you think that you might like to take to address that? And sometimes I'll hear the most hocus pocus things, but I let that go. So I've heard a job seeker say, well, I think if I just, I've read this thing about this St. John's wort, and I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to walk around the block 20 minutes. My doctor said if I walk 20 minutes, I'll be right. I say, that's great. Let's give it a go. Because what you want the job seeker to do is to do something. It may not be your preferred option. It's a bit like my daughter with the dresses. I want her to wear something, but she hasn't chosen my preferred option. But give the job seeker a menu of options and get them to choose one of them. Give them some boundaries. You want them doing something. If it's not counselling, it doesn't have to be counselling. It might be walking around the block, St. John's wort. That's okay as a starting point.
Excellent, great. That's everything I've had come in through the chat and the Q&A.
Thank you again, everybody. Again, next week we will be doing lunchtime, 12 o'clock, so that you can keep going with your work, have a quick lunch break. Thank you to the IEP. If you're interested in any more tools to help you on this process, we have had a lot of questions tonight. Please consider joining our other lunchtime sessions that happen on a Tuesday with Natalie and Andy. You can get in contact with Natalie and Andy. Their details are on the webinar sign up. So thank you, everybody. We'll leave the chat going for a little bit. I know people need to get back to work, but we'll leave it going in case you want to network for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Thanks again.
Thanks, Kylie. Another brilliant session. So much to jam pack in that time we have. And as Kylie said, head on over to the Better Health Generation and get more and more knowledge from that, tools you need, and some really good practical support and advice. And if you missed any of this series, please head on over to the IP YouTube channel where you can subscribe and get notifications of new things going on there. I mentioned in the chat, we've got lots and lots of interesting webinars coming. And hopefully we can keep the bar really high in terms of what we've done over the last few weeks for the Better Health Generation. And I'm hoping the Better Health Generation will be, clearly they're back next week, and then hopefully we'll have them back after that as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Really great to see you again, and stay safe, and we'll speak to you soon.